if it's actually something that Severin wrote, but it's a beautiful piece of writing. Keats, this is about their journey, which was long and arduous, and when they got to Naples they had to stay in the port for 11 or 12 days because there'd been an outbreak of cholera in England, and so they were made to stay in the port, and this was terrible for Keats because his chest and the damp was just doing him much worse than if he'd stayed in England at this point. Anyway, they finally managed to leave the port and they travelled to Rome. Keats is in a hired carriage, a vettura, on his way from Naples to Rome. He has less than 4 months to live. It is November 1820, warm wild flowers everywhere. I am thinking to make more room for my sick friend and decide to walk. We are tourists but broke. We won't eat well, we won't ride well, but we will see at one point, improbably, a cardinal with 2 footmen also dressed in red, shooting songbirds. I can't keep my hands off the wild flowers spread out like a motif of the mortal world, spread after spread of mortal colour. I don't know what to do with them once I've picked them. So I put them by the handful in the small carriage with Keats, like company. This goes on, off and on for days. By the time we reach the outskirts of Rome, Keats is witness to his own funeral. Keats doesn't read any of the letters that Fanny sends him when he gets here. He's too distressed by it. He can't deal with it. So the letters lie unopened. But he does write to Fanny himself quite often. And the letters at Bright Star are all about, the film is all about the letters between Keats and Fanny Brawne, and they're some of the most moving correspondence ever written. Break your heart. The thought of leaving Miss Brawne is beyond everything horrible. The sense of darkness coming over me. I eternally see her figure eternally vanishing. Some of the phrases she was in the habit of using during my last nursing at Wentworth Place ring in my ears. Is there another life? Shall I awake and find all this a dream? There must be. We cannot be created for this sort of suffering. Shelley, Byron and Mary Shelley had all toured around Rome and called it the Paradise of Exiles. It was this glorious place that spelt freedom. To Keats it was a place of extraordinary agony, and he could hardly balance a book on his stomach to read, the pain was so bad. He didn't have any pain relief because he'd been left in London. He'd wanted to bring opium with him, perhaps to take an overdose so he didn't have to live too long. But Severin stopped him doing it. There were moments when Keith got better, and Severin thought that he was going to be all right. He'd send letters to England to say, Keats is better, he's improving, he might live. But then by the time the letters arrived in England, of course, his condition had changed for the worse again. The house wasn't quite as beautiful looking as it is now. It was slightly downhill, so don't be deceived by this beautiful, is it mahogany? Walnut. They were cheap digs. Severin writes, "'Twas a joy to me to see Keats improve from day to day, the winter being very fine, he walked every day, and was even like himself. But our drawback was the very bad dinners, so that Keats said to me, 'Severin, I found out a way of having good dinners.' But he would not tell me how. When the porter came with the basket, which they had to pull up and down through the window because they knew that Keats was ill, When the porter came with the basket, Keats opened it, and seeing that it was the same horrid mess as usual, he opened the window and quietly and deliberately emptied out on the steps each plate. This done, he closed the basket and pointed to the porter to take it away. Sure enough, this was a masterpiece, more eloquent than words, as in half an hour we got an excellent dinner and so on every day. One of the last poems Keats wrote, some say it's the last, just happy, and I have another theory, and many other people. But the most cohesive poem that Keats wrote last is called Bright Star. Do you all know it? It was written for Fanny. He worked on it at the port in Naples. It's about love, and it's a sonnet, and it's just Keats at his most extraordinary, because he's playing with his own heart and our own hearts in every line. He starts off saying, bright star, would that I were steadfast as thou art, would that I were still and solid and endless as you are up there. I'm not, and I'm never going to be. So in terms of the sentiment and the language, it's pure Keats, and it's also a way of him being with her and giving this very simple, intimate gesture a grandness and a gravity which lasts right to this very moment. I'm reading this to you now. Bright star, would I were steadfast as thou art, not in lone splendour hung aloft the night and watching with eternal lids apart like nature's patient, sleepless eremite, the moving waters at their priest-like task of pure ablution round earth's human shores, or gazing on the new soft fallen mask of snow upon the mountains and the moors. No, yet still steadfast, still unchangeable, pillowed upon my fair love's ripening breast, to feel forever its soft swell and fall, awake forever in a sweet unrest, still to hear her tender taken breath, and so live forever, or else swoon to death. I mean, one could argue that in terms of negative capability and not quite knowing and being uncertain, Keats, that poem, he was almost writing his own destiny. He did swoon to death, just in an extraordinarily painful way. And the house that we see here, for me, is almost his unfinished poetry, the lines he never wrote, the lines that we have to intuit ourselves by just being here and understanding what he wanted us to understand and the freedoms he wanted us to feel as artists, as thinkers, as human beings, as people walking down the street. I can't tell you how much I've fallen in love with Keats getting ready for this talk for you all. Finally, two things. The room he died in and his grave, which is in the Protestant cemetery. If any of you have been inspired or are inspired anyway or haven't been yet, please go, and I'll come with you if you like. Oscar Wilde, when he came to the grave of Keats, threw himself on it and started to weep, saying it was the most holy place in Rome. Typical Oscar Wilde. Subversive to the end. The inscription on the grave, most of you probably know, says, "Here lies one whose name is writ in water." Giuseppe, and I now agree with him, says that he thinks that was the last poem Keats wrote or didn't write because he was in too much pain and Severin had to write it down for him. Giuseppe also says it's not to do with being short, that it might be a secret haiku. I have another theory, well, it's just an addition, that Catullus, it's also said that Catullus inspired those words. Looking at the pressure over there. And the inscription the line that may have inspired the inscription could maybe be, "What a woman says to her ardent lover should be written in wind and running water." And my thought, my heart, my little poet's head says to me, the fountain that outside that Keats would have heard is running water, and that must have been Fanny Braun's voice to him on so many occasions, and perhaps that's why he wanted that to be the inscription. Pure whimsy. What has Keats given to the people that were left in his wake? I definitely see it as being left in his wake in terms of being a poet and a human soul. He gave me the freedom to write in the most uncertain, wobbly, unresolved, deeply in pain, love-stricken creature, and helped me to know that that was okay. The fractured, broken, unresolved self is basically the place I've always written from and always will. I just want to read you the poem that I've written that's most inspired by him, I think, by the romantic imagination. It's from my mistress account book, which some of you may know, not about my affair, it's all about being a mistress, but I just want to read you one, which is the last one. And the reason I've chosen it is because it's not only about this broken, lost love, but also it's about collaboration. It's about writing to and from and with people that you never even met, or people that you just felt moved you, or that you had something in opposition to say to. And this is about seeing a book of poems at the end of my affair by Sharon Olds in Waterstones. And her book of poetry was about the fact her husband had just left her for another woman. And my book of poetry was about being the other woman. So I wrote this poem about having a conversation with the book, and I think Keats might have approved of it. On seeing a copy of Stag's Leap in a bookshop. Why can't I find the courage to buy it yet? The fallen woman, buying the words by the wife whose husband left. I am her opposite, her inversion, the thing she hates. This work is neat and finished and complete, not like us, so still and frayed as the names of mortals from classic texts who lost the quest to be. But the book looks up, and in its kindness says, "Pick me up and read. Let me see. It's only the past that will bite. Let love bite, then leave it be." Thank you very much, everyone.